Queen Zarathul stood on the crystal balcony of her palace, watching the 3 purple moons rise over the capital city of Veltara. Her silver skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her forearms crossed elegantly behind her back. As ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, she commanded respect across 12 star systems. Her people were warriors, each standing nearly 9 feet tall with natural armor plating and strength that could crush steel. But tonight, she felt small and uncertain. The marriage contract lay on her desk inside, written in the flowing script of the Galactic Alliance. After 3 years of devastating war with the savage Korthak horde, the Alliance had brokered a desperate peace agreement. The terms were simple but shocking. The most powerful military leader in human space would marry the Zephyrian queen, uniting their forces against the common enemy. Zara had laughed when she first read the proposal. Humans were tiny, weak creatures, barely 5 feet tall. They had no natural weapons, no armor, no psychic abilities. What could possibly make their military leader worthy of marrying the queen of the greatest warrior race in the galaxy? The answer had arrived 3 days ago. Captain Marcus Chen stepped through the palace doors, and Zara almost couldn't believe her eyes. He was even smaller than she expected, standing just over 6 feet tall. His dark hair was neatly cut, and his brown eyes held a quiet intelligence. He wore a simple blue military uniform with minimal decorations. Everything about him seemed utterly ordinary. "Your Majesty," he said with a respectful bow, "I am honored by this alliance." Zara's advisors had bristled at his casual manner. General Krex, her most trusted commander, had whispered urgent warnings about human deception. But Zara found herself curious. During the war, human forces had achieved impossible victories against overwhelming odds. Their ships were smaller and weaker than Zephyrian vessels, yet somehow they kept winning. The wedding ceremony was a grand affair, broadcast across both empires. Zara wore the traditional gold armor of Zephyrian royalty, while Marcus stood beside her in dress uniform, looking impossibly small next to her imposing frame. The crowd of Zephyrian nobles watched with barely concealed skepticism as their queen bound herself to this tiny alien. "Do you, Marcus Chen of Earth, swear to defend the Zephyrian Empire with your life?" asked the high priest. "I do," Marcus replied simply. "Do you, Queen Zarathul, swear to honor this human as your equal and partner?" Zara hesitated for just a moment, then spoke the ancient words. "I do." The crystal goblets filled with Zephyrian bonding wine clinked together, sealing their union. As tradition demanded, they each drank from the other's cup. The liquid burned Zara's throat, but she noticed Marcus showed no reaction to the potent alcohol that could knock out most aliens. That night, Marcus was given quarters in the royal wing. Zara expected him to make demands or try to assert authority over her people. Instead, he spent his time quietly studying Zephyrian culture and language. When servants brought him food, he thanked them in broken Zephyrian, making them smile despite themselves. "Why did you agree to this marriage?" Zara asked him during their first private dinner together. Marcus looked up from his meal, considering his words carefully. "Because my people believe in keeping their promises. The Alliance needed this union to survive, so here I am." "You speak as if it's a duty rather than an honor," Zara said, slightly offended. "Isn't it both?" Marcus replied. "I've read about your people's history, Your Majesty. You've never been conquered because you're the finest warriors in the galaxy. Being chosen to stand beside you is indeed an honor, even if the circumstances are unusual." His diplomatic answer impressed her, but Zara remained skeptical. Over the following weeks, she watched him carefully. Marcus attended strategy meetings but rarely spoke. When he did offer suggestions, they were often dismissed by her generals. He showed no anger at their dismissal, simply nodding and returning to his silent observation. The real test came when reports arrived of Korthak raiders attacking the outer colonies. General Krex immediately prepared to lead a massive fleet to drive them off, following traditional Zephyrian tactics of overwhelming force. "Permission to offer an alternative strategy, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked quietly. The war room fell silent. Krex's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. "Human, you know nothing of real warfare. Your people hide behind technology instead of fighting with honor." Marcus nodded respectfully. "You're absolutely right, General. Humans are cowards compared to Zephyrians. We could never match your courage in direct battle." The admission surprised everyone. Zara leaned forward, intrigued. "Then what do you suggest?" Marcus approached the holographic display showing the rated colonies. The Korthak expect you to charge in with overwhelming force. It's what they're prepared for. But what if we gave them exactly what they want, while doing something they'd never expect? He manipulated the display showing fleet movements. Send your main force here just as General Krex planned. Make it obvious. Let them prepare their defenses and gather their ships. And then, Zara asked, while they're focused on your impressive fleet, a small human stealth ship slips past their defenses and rescues the colonists they've captured. No glorious battle, no honorable combat. Just quiet, cowardly human sneaking. Krex snorted in disgust. Dishonorable tactics. Completely, Marcus agreed. But effective. Your people get to fight the battle they want and the colonists go home safely. Everyone wins except the Korthak. Zara studied the plan. It was subtle, complex, and utterly unlike anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. And if the stealth mission fails? Marcus met her eyes steadily. Then you proceed with General Krex's original plan. The only thing you lose is one small ship and its crew. You would lead this mission yourself, Zara said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty. The room erupted in protest from her advisors. The Queen's husband risking himself on such a mission was unthinkable. But Zara raised one hand for silence. We will try both approaches, she decided. General Krex, prepare your fleet. Captain Chen, you have permission for your stealth mission. As the meeting dispersed, Zara caught Marcus's arm. Why risk yourself for our colonists? They mean nothing to humanity. Marcus smiled, and for the first time she saw something flicker in his eyes that wasn't quite human. Your Majesty, those colonists became my people the moment we married. I protect what's mine. The way he said mine sent an unexpected shiver down Zara's spine. For just an instant, the small human seemed far more dangerous than any Zephyrian warrior she'd ever known. The human stealth ship Whisper launched from the palace spaceport 3 hours before General Krex's massive fleet departed. Zara watched from her command center as the tiny vessel disappeared into the void, its advanced cloaking technology making it invisible to all sensors. Marcus had insisted on taking only a skeleton crew of 5 humans, all volunteers from his original ship. Zara had offered Zephyrian warriors, but Marcus politely declined, claiming his people worked better in small groups. Arrogant fool, General Krex muttered as he prepared his own departure. He will get himself killed and shame our queen. Zara said nothing, but privately she wondered if Marcus was being reckless or if there was more to his confidence than met the eye. The Korthak raiders had taken over 3 mining colonies in the Zerian system, capturing nearly 10,000 Zephyrian civilians. Intelligence reports showed they were using the prisoners as shields, making a direct assault extremely costly. It was exactly the kind of situation that frustrated Zephyrian military doctrine. General Krex's fleet jumped to hyperspace with great fanfare, broadcasting their approach on open channels to ensure the Korthak knew they were coming. Meanwhile, the Whisper moved silently through space, taking an indirect route that would bring them to the system from an unexpected angle. Zara spent the next 2 days monitoring communications from both forces. Krex reported successful deployment and was engaging Korthak defensive fleets exactly as planned. The enemy had pulled most of their ships to counter the Zephyrian assault, leaving the captured colonies lightly defended. Then the reports from Marcus stopped completely. Your Majesty, her communications officer reported, we've lost all contact with the human stealth ship. No distress signals, no status updates. Zara's chest tightened with unexpected worry. She told herself it was concern for the mission's success, not personal fear for Marcus's safety. A queen couldn't afford such emotional attachments, but as hours passed with no word, she found herself pacing the command center and snapping at her advisors. Perhaps the human finally showed his true nature, suggested her intelligence chief, Veltor. These small creatures are natural cowards. He may have fled rather than face danger. Zara's 4 hands clenched into fists. The suggestion that Marcus was a coward made her unreasonably angry, though she couldn't understand why. He was just a political necessity, a temporary alliance partner. On the 3rd day, General Krex sent a grim report. His forces had successfully engaged the main Korthak fleet, but the battle was proving costly. The enemy was fighting with desperate fury, and intelligence suggested they were preparing to execute the prisoners rather than allow them to be rescued. We need those colonies cleared immediately, Krex's message continued. If the human stealth mission has failed, we must assault the installations directly. Casualties will be heavy, but we cannot allow the Korthak to murder our people. Zara stared at the tactical display, weighing impossible choices. Send Krex's warriors to their deaths in a desperate assault or abandon 10,000 civilians to save the army. Then her censor officer gasped. Your Majesty, ships approaching the capital. Multiple contacts, moving fast! Zara's blood froze. Had the Korthak somehow broken through their defenses? Battle stations. How many ships? 37 vessels, Your Majesty. But they're broadcasting Zephyrian identification codes. The main display flickered to life, showing a ragged convoy of transport ships limping toward the palace spaceport. At their head flew a small, sleek vessel that Zara recognized immediately. The whisper had returned. Open communications, Zara ordered, her heart's pounding. The display resolved into Marcus's familiar face, but something was different. His usually calm demeanor showed signs of strain, and there was something harder in his eyes. Your Majesty, he said with a tired smile, requesting permission to dock. We have some guests who are eager to get home. Marcus, what happened? You disappeared for 3 days. We found the colonies, Your Majesty. All of them. The prisoners are safe and accounted for along with their Korthak guards. Zara blinked in confusion. Their guards? I don't understand. Marcus's smile grew wider and for a moment it seemed almost predatory. We'll explain everything when we dock. But you might want to contact General Krex and tell him to accept the Korthak surrender. Their fleet should be ready to negotiate by now. The transmission ended, leaving Zara staring at the screen in bewilderment. How had Marcus not only rescued 10,000 prisoners, but also captured their guards? And what did he mean about Korthak's surrender? An hour later, she stood in the main landing bay watching the transport ships disgorge their passengers. Zephyrian civilians stumbled out, weak but alive, tears streaming down their faces as they embraced waiting family members. Behind them came something unprecedented, lines of Korthak warriors in restraints, their savage features showing unmistakable fear. The whisper landed last, and Marcus emerged looking tired but satisfied. Zara approached him, her mind reeling with questions. How? She asked simply. Marcus gestured toward the Korthak prisoners. Would you believe me if I said we asked nicely? No. Good. You're learning not to trust humans. His expression grew serious. Your Majesty, could we speak privately? There are some things about this mission that your people might find disturbing. An hour later, they sat alone in Zara's private chambers while Marcus recounted the mission. The Whisper had successfully infiltrated the Zirian system and located the 3 captured colonies. But instead of attempting a conventional rescue, Marcus had done something that made Zara's blood run cold. We identified the Korthak communication frequencies and uploaded a virus into their fleet network, Marcus explained calmly. Nothing dramatic, just a little program that made their ships think they were under attack by invisible enemies. You turned their own technology against them? It gets worse. While their fleet was panicking and shooting at phantom targets, we broadcast audio recordings of Korthak death screams on all their frequencies, their own voices captured from previous battles and modified to sound like they were being tortured. Zara stared at him in horror. You made them think their comrades were being slaughtered by invisible attackers. Marcus nodded. Psychological warfare, Your Majesty. By the time we actually appeared and offered to negotiate for the prisoners, the Korthak were so terrified they practically begged us to take their captives. They were convinced we had some kind of supernatural power. And the guards we captured volunteered to come with us. They were too scared to stay behind and face whatever invisible monsters they thought were hunting them. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but Zara could see satisfaction in his eyes. The Korthak fleet is in complete disarray. They're seeing enemies everywhere and shooting at their own ships. General Krex shouldn't have any trouble accepting their surrender. Zara processed this information slowly. What Marcus described wasn't warfare as her people understood it. It was manipulation, deception, and psychological torture. It was also brilliantly effective. Your people call this honorable combat? She asked. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your Majesty, humans don't fight honorable combat. We fight to win by any means necessary. We study our enemies, find their weaknesses, and exploit them without mercy. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. You asked me once why I agreed to this marriage. The truth is, humanity needs allies like the Zephyrians. You're everything we're not. Strong, honorable, direct. But you also fight wars the way you've always fought them, and that makes you predictable. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. And humans are not predictable. We're the species that survived by being too weak to fight fair, Your Majesty. So we learned to cheat, to lie, to turn our enemies' strengths against them. We became very, very good at it. Marcus turned back to face her, and Zara saw something in his expression that made her realize she had never really seen her husband before. The quiet diplomatic human who had spent weeks studying her culture and accepting dismissal from her generals was just a mask. "What exactly are you, Marcus Chen?" she asked quietly. His smile was gentle, but his eyes were cold as winter stars. "I'm exactly what humanity needs me to be, Your Majesty. And now I'm exactly what the Zephyrian Empire needs too." News of the Zerian victory spread across the Empire within hours. General Krex's report was brief and professional, but Zara could read the confusion between the lines. The Korthak fleet had indeed surrendered, but not because of Zephyrian military might. The enemy had been in complete chaos, shooting at empty space and screaming about invisible demons. "I do not understand what the humans did," Krex admitted during his private debrief. "One moment we were engaged in honorable combat. The next the Korthak were begging for mercy and babbling about monsters that hunt in the dark." Zara nodded thoughtfully. She understood perfectly, which made the victory even more disturbing. Over the following weeks, Marcus resumed his quiet routine. He attended court functions, studied Zephyrian history, and politely listened to her advisors dismiss his suggestions. But now Zara watched him differently. Every peaceful gesture, every diplomatic smile seemed like careful camouflage hiding something far more dangerous. The other powers in the galaxy had also taken notice of the Zerian incident. The Crystalline Confederacy sent ambassadors asking detailed questions about new Zephyrian tactics. The hive minds demanded explanations for the unusual Korthak behavior. Everyone wanted to know how the greatest warrior race in the galaxy had suddenly developed the ability to break enemy morale without firing a shot. "Let them wonder," Marcus suggested, when Zara asked his opinion. "Uncertainty is a weapon too. The real test came when the Void Hunters announced their intention to expand into Zephyrian space. The Void Hunters were older than most galactic civilizations, a race of energy beings who consumed the life force of entire worlds. They had no physical form, making them nearly impossible to fight with conventional weapons. For centuries they had been contained in the dead zone beyond the galactic rim, but now they were moving inward, claiming 3 uninhabited systems on the Zephyrian border. "We cannot allow this invasion," General Krex declared during the Emergency War Council. "But our weapons are useless against beings of pure energy. How do we fight an enemy we cannot touch?" The assembled generals murmured agreement. Zephyrian military doctrine was built around physical combat, armor, and weapons. How did you punch something made of living light? Marcus had been silent throughout the debate, but now he spoke quietly. "Your Majesty, might I suggest a different approach?" Krex snorted. "Human, the Void Hunters are not Korthak raiders. You cannot frighten energy beings with audio recordings." "You're absolutely right," Marcus agreed. "But you're thinking about this wrong. You're trying to fight them as if they were physical opponents." He stood and approached the holographic display showing Void Hunter movements. "What do the Void Hunters want?" "They consume life energy." "What do they fear?" "Starvation." "How do they navigate?" "By sensing the electromagnetic signatures of living worlds." Zara leaned forward. "Continue." "The Void Hunters are like sharks following blood in the water. They sense life and move toward it. But what if we could make them think they were swimming toward food, when they were actually swimming toward poison?" Marcus manipulated the display, highlighting several dead systems near the border. These worlds were strip-mined centuries ago. No life, no electromagnetic signatures, no reason for the Void Hunters to visit. But what if we could make them seem appetizing? "How?" demanded General Krex. Marcus smiled that cold smile Zara was learning to recognize. "We give them what they're looking for. Life energy signatures." The plan Marcus outlined made Zara's skin crawl with its calculated cruelty. Using human technology, they would broadcast false electromagnetic signatures from the dead worlds, making them appear to teem with life. The signals would be irresistible to the Void Hunters, drawing them away from inhabited systems. "And when they arrive at these dead worlds," Zara asked, "they find nothing, no life energy to consume. They'll search frantically, growing weaker and more desperate. Meanwhile, we broadcast stronger false signals from deeper into dead space, leading them further and further from any real food source. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus was proposing to systematically starve the Void Hunters by leading them on an endless chase through lifeless systems. That's not warfare, General Krex said quietly. That's murder. Marcus nodded calmly. Yes, it is. The question is whether you prefer to murder them or let them murder your civilians. Zara felt her four stomachs twist with conflicting emotions. The plan was brilliant, efficient, and absolutely horrible. It was also completely outside anything in Zephyrian military tradition. How long would it take? She asked. 6 months, maybe less. The Void Hunters will weaken progressively as they chase false signals. Eventually, they'll be too weak to maintain coherence and will dissipate naturally. You would genocide an entire race through deception and starvation. Marcus met her eyes steadily. Your Majesty, the Void Hunters have consumed 17 civilizations in the past 1,000 years. They've turned entire star systems into lifeless voids. They don't negotiate, they don't retreat, and they don't stop. This is the only way to stop them permanently. The debate raged for hours. Some of Zara's advisors were horrified by the proposal's ruthlessness. Others pointed out that conventional weapons were useless against the Void Hunters, making Marcus's plan their only real option. Finally, Zara called for silence. Captain Chen, implement your plan, but you will report directly to me at each stage. I want to know exactly what we're doing. Over the following months, Zara watched in fascination and horror as Marcus orchestrated the slow destruction of the Void Hunters. Human ships deployed signal generators throughout dead space, creating an elaborate web of false life signs. The energy beings took the bait immediately, abandoning their planned invasion to chase the phantom meals. Marcus monitored their progress obsessively, adjusting signal strength and locations to keep the Void Hunters moving. He spoke of the ancient entities like a predator, tracking wounded prey, calculating exactly how much energy they had left and how far they could travel before collapse. The lead pack will reach dissipation threshold in 3 days, he reported during one of their private meetings. The stragglers should follow within a week. Zara studied the tactical display showing Void Hunter positions. The energy beings were scattered across dozens of dead systems, growing visibly weaker as they exhausted themselves searching for non-existent food. Do you feel anything about this? She asked. Guilt? Satisfaction? Regret? Marcus considered the question seriously. Relief, mostly. They were a threat to everything living in this galaxy. Now they're not, that's all. They're a sentient species, Marcus. Older than any of our civilizations. Your Majesty, they chose to be predators. Predators die when they can't find prey. That's how nature works. His matter-of-fact tone sent chills through Zara's body. This was how humans thought about warfare, about enemies, about survival itself. Not as a matter of honor or glory, but as a simple question of who lived and who died. When the last Void Hunter dissipated 3 days later, the galaxy barely noticed. The ancient threat had simply faded away, leaving empty space where one of the oldest races had once existed. The celebration in the Zephyrian capital was subdued. They had won a victory without firing a shot, eliminated an impossible enemy without losing a single soldier. But there was something unsettling about the triumph, something that made even veteran warriors uncomfortable. That night, as Zara stood on her balcony looking at the stars, Marcus joined her in the darkness. The galaxy is safer now, he said quietly. I know. Zara's voice was troubled. But I keep thinking about what you said, that humans fight to win by any means necessary. Does that frighten you? Zara turned to look at her husband, really seeing him for perhaps the first time. The small, diplomatic human who had married her was still there, but underneath she could sense something vast and calculating, a mind that viewed the entire galaxy as a chessboard. Yes, she admitted, it terrifies me, because I'm starting to understand that when humans say by any means necessary, there really are no limits. Marcus smiled sadly. Your Majesty, you wanted to know what I really am. Now you know. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Zara spent the next several weeks avoiding Marcus. She threw herself into royal duties, reviewing trade agreements and settling disputes between noble houses. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the tactical display showing Void Hunter positions as they weakened and died in empty space. Her advisors noticed the change in their relationship. General Krex privately expressed satisfaction that the Queen had finally seen through human deception, while others worried about the political implications of a fractured royal marriage. The truth was more complex. Zara wasn't afraid of Marcus because he was evil. She was afraid because he was effective, and that effectiveness came from a way of thinking that challenged everything she believed about honor and warfare. The crisis came when the hegemony of twisted souls declared war on the Zephyrian Empire. The hegemony was a coalition of the galaxy's most sadistic races, united by their love of causing pain. They had been watching the recent Zephyrian victories with growing concern, and decided to test the Empire's new capabilities before they became too dangerous. They've taken the Corrales system, General Krex reported grimly. 40 billion civilians under their control. Intelligence reports suggest they're using torture broadcasts to demoralize our border worlds. Zara's blood ran cold. The hegemony didn't just conquer worlds, they turned them into examples. Entire populations would be subjected to unimaginable suffering, broadcast across the galaxy as a warning to potential enemies. Conventional military response? She asked. 6 months minimum to assemble a fleet large enough to break their defenses, Krex replied. By then, most of the civilians will be dead. The War Council fell silent. 40 billion lives hung in the balance, and traditional Zephyrian tactics were too slow to save them. Marcus had been absent from recent meetings, but now he appeared in the doorway of the war room. Your Majesty, might I offer a suggestion? Every eye turned toward him. Krex's expression was openly hostile, while others showed nervous anticipation. They had all heard rumors about the Void Hunter incident. Speak, Zara said tersely. Marcus approached the tactical display showing hegemony positions. The Twisted Souls made a mistake when they chose torture as their primary weapon. They've revealed exactly what motivates them. Pain and suffering, General Krex said. We already know this. No, Marcus corrected. Control through fear. They want their victims to feel helpless and abandoned. But what if we could turn that against them? He manipulated the display, highlighting communication networks throughout hegemony space. Every torture broadcast they send is transmitted through their central communication array on Corrales Prime. They want everyone to see their power. Your point? Zara asked. Marcus's expression grew cold as winter vacuum. We give them exactly what they want. A demonstration of true helplessness. The plan Marcus outlined made the Void Hunter operation look merciful by comparison. Using human cyber warfare technology, they would infiltrate the hegemony's communication network and take control of their torture broadcasts. But instead of stopping the transmissions, they would redirect them. Every act of cruelty they commit will be broadcast directly back to their own worlds, Marcus explained. Their families, their children, their elderly parents, all watching in real time as their soldiers torture innocent civilians. They're sadists, General Krex objected. They enjoy cruelty. The soldiers do, Marcus agreed. But their civilians are different. Most hegemony worlds maintain the illusion that their military actions are justified and necessary. They tell themselves that their soldiers are heroes protecting their way of life. Marcus smiled that terrifying smile. What happens when a mother watches her son slowly torture a child to death? When a wife sees her husband commit acts of casual evil? When elderly grandparents realize their descendants have become monsters? The room fell completely silent. Several advisors looked physically ill. You want to destroy their society from within, Zara said quietly. I want to make them face what they really are, Marcus replied. No propaganda, no justification, no patriotic speeches. Just raw, unedited footage of their people committing atrocities against helpless civilians. And when their society collapses, civil war, the civilians will demand their government stop the torture broadcasts. The military will refuse. Within weeks, the hegemony will be fighting itself instead of conquering new worlds. Zara stared at the display, her mind reeling. Marcus wasn't just proposing to defeat the hegemony militarily. He was planning to psychologically demolish their entire civilization. How long? She asked. 3 weeks to establish network control. 6 weeks for complete societal breakdown. The Corrales civilians will be freed when the hegemony military withdraws to deal with revolution on their home worlds. The debate that followed was the most intense of Zara's reign. Several advisors threatened to resign rather than participate in what they called psychological terrorism. Others argued that conventional warfare would take too long and result in the deaths of 40 billion innocents. This isn't war. General Kreck said finally. This is the systematic destruction of an entire species' collective sanity. Marcus nodded calmly. Yes, but it's also the only way to save those civilians in time. Zara dismissed the council and asked Marcus to remain behind. When they were alone, she confronted him directly. What you're proposing will traumatize billions of people. Hegemony children will watch their parents revealed as monsters. Families will tear themselves apart. Their entire society will collapse. Yes, Marcus agreed. And 40 billion Keralis civilians will live instead of dying in torture chambers. That's not the point. Marcus turned to face her fully, and for the first time since their marriage, Zara saw genuine emotion in his eyes. But it wasn't guilt or regret. It was a cold, burning fury. Your Majesty, the hegemony chose to build their society around the systematic torture of innocents. They chose to broadcast suffering as entertainment. They chose to make helplessness and pain their primary exports to the galaxy. His voice remained level, but Zara could feel the anger radiating from him like heat from a star. I'm not destroying their society. I'm revealing what it already is. If they can't handle watching their own actions, maybe they shouldn't be committing them. Zara realized she was seeing something she had never encountered before. Human moral outrage channeled through ruthless pragmatism. Marcus wasn't proposing psychological warfare because he enjoyed cruelty. He was doing it because he genuinely believed the hegemony deserved to face the consequences of their choices. And after? She asked. When their civilization lies in ruins? Then they rebuild something better or they don't. That's their choice. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Your Majesty, I know this is difficult for you. Zephyrians fight with honor because you believe in honor. But some enemies don't deserve honorable combat. Some enemies deserve to be shown exactly what they are. Zara looked at her husband and realized she was facing a choice that would define her reign. She could maintain Zephyrian military honor and watch 40 billion civilians die slowly in torture chambers, or she could embrace human methods and save them at the cost of her own moral certainty. Implement your plan, she said finally. But Marcus, I want you to understand something. Each time we use these methods, we become a little more like you and a little less like ourselves. Marcus nodded gravely. I know, Your Majesty, and I'm sorry for that, but sometimes survival requires sacrificing purity. As he left to begin preparations, Zara remained alone in the war room, staring at the display showing 40 billion lives hanging in the balance. She was beginning to understand that her marriage to Marcus wasn't just a political alliance. It was a fundamental transformation of what the Zephyrian Empire could become. The question was whether that transformation was worth the price they would all pay for it. The operation against the hegemony began with surgical precision. Human cyber warfare specialists worked around the clock to infiltrate the enemy communication networks, while Zephyrian intelligence provided detailed maps of hegemony infrastructure. Marcus coordinated everything from a secure command center deep within the palace. Zara watched the first phase unfold with growing unease. The humans didn't just hack into hegemony systems, they studied them obsessively. They mapped every communication relay, every data storage facility, every entertainment network. They learned how hegemony society functioned at the most intimate level. We're not just taking control of their military communications, Marcus explained during one of their briefings. We're infiltrating their civilian media, their social networks, their personal messaging systems. When this starts, every citizen in hegemony space will see exactly what their government does in their name. All of them? Zara asked. Even children? Marcus's expression didn't change. Children grow up, Your Majesty. It's better they learn the truth now than discover it when they're old enough to participate. The transformation began on a Tuesday morning, Hegemony Standard Time. Across dozens of worlds, civilians settled in to watch their morning entertainment broadcasts. Instead of the usual propaganda and carefully edited military reports, they found themselves watching live footage from the torture chambers of Keralis. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Hegemony society had always maintained the fiction that their military was engaged in necessary police actions against dangerous criminals. The civilian population had never seen the reality of what their soldiers did to captured enemies. They certainly had never watched their own children and neighbors committing acts of calculated sadism against helpless families. Within hours, civilian communication networks across hegemony space lit up with desperate messages. Parents desperately tried to contact military children, begging them to stop the broadcasts. Spouses demanded explanations from partners serving in the occupation forces. Elderly citizens who had spent decades supporting their government suddenly found themselves watching their grandchildren torture innocent civilians for entertainment. Marcus monitored the flood of incoming data with clinical detachment. Social media engagement is up 4,000%, he reported. Psychological evaluation algorithms suggest acute traumatic stress in approximately 60% of the civilian population. And the military response? Zara asked, confusion and denial. Local commanders are claiming the broadcasts are enemy propaganda, but they can't explain how we obtained such detailed footage of their operations. The really devastating phase began when human systems started cross-referencing military personnel records with civilian family databases. Every act of cruelty was automatically tagged with the perpetrator's identity and transmitted directly to their home community. Mothers watched their sons commit murder. Wives saw their husbands torture children. Children discovered that their heroic parents were monsters. The psychological impact was exactly what Marcus had predicted. Hegemony civilian networks exploded with demands for explanations, for justice, for immediate withdrawal from Corrales. Peace protests erupted on 7 worlds within the first week. Military recruitment centers were attacked by mobs of previously loyal citizens. But the most devastating effect was on the hegemony military itself. Morale collapse is accelerating beyond projections, Marcus reported during their daily briefing. Soldiers are receiving direct video messages from family members begging them to stop. Several units have simply abandoned their posts rather than face continued broadcasts. Zara studied the reports with growing horror. The plan was working perfectly, which somehow made it worse. What about the Corrales civilians? Hegemony forces are withdrawing from population centers to avoid being filmed. Most torture facilities have been abandoned. Casualty rates among prisoners have dropped by 90%. Marcus manipulated the tactical display to show troop movements across the Corrales system. Red markers indicated hegemony positions, but they were shrinking rapidly as units pulled back or simply deserted. At current rates, organized resistance will collapse within 2 weeks, he continued. The hegemony government is already losing control of 3 home worlds to civilian uprising. Zara nodded absently, but her attention was focused on the human operators working in the command center. They monitored streams of desperate communications from hegemony families, cataloged instances of psychological breakdown, and adjusted their psychological warfare algorithms to maximize traumatic impact. Marcus, she said quietly, are your people enjoying this? Marcus followed her gaze to his staff. No, Your Majesty. If anything, they find it distasteful. But they understand its necessity. They seem very efficient at psychological torture for people who find it distasteful. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Your Majesty, humans have been practicing psychological warfare on each other for thousands of years. We're very good at it because we've had to be. When you're the weakest species in the galaxy, you learn to use every advantage you can find. That evening, Zara received reports that made her question everything she thought she knew about warfare. The hegemony's central government had collapsed completely, with civilian revolution spreading to all major worlds. Military units were fragmenting as soldiers either joined the uprising or fled to avoid being identified in the broadcasts. But the human operation wasn't finished. We're implementing Phase 3, Marcus announced the next morning. Targeted rehabilitation protocols. What does that mean? Marcus brought up new displays showing psychological profiles of hegemony military personnel. We've identified soldiers who show signs of moral conflict about their actions. The broadcasts have triggered guilt responses in approximately 30% of active military personnel. And we're sending them personalized messages. Videos from their victims' families. Letters from their own children expressing disappointment and shame. Counseling resources for dealing with war trauma. Zara stared at him in disbelief. You're offering therapy to enemy soldiers? We're offering them a path to redemption, Marcus corrected. Many of these people were born into the hegemony system and never questioned it. Now they're facing the reality of what they've done. We can either help them become better people or watch them destroy themselves with guilt. The final stage of the psychological campaign was perhaps the most disturbing. Human systems began broadcasting messages of hope alongside the torture footage. Hegemony civilians were shown examples of soldiers who had refused orders, officers who had protected civilians, and military units that had surrendered rather than continue the occupation. You're not just destroying their society, Zara realized. You're rebuilding it according to human moral standards. Marcus nodded calmly. The hegemony based their civilization on the idea that cruelty was strength and compassion was weakness. We're teaching them that the opposite is true, by traumatizing an entire species, by showing them the truth about themselves. They're free to make their own choices about what to do with that knowledge. 3 weeks after the operation began, the last hegemony forces withdrew from the Corrales system. 40 billion civilians were free, their torture chambers abandoned, their captors either fled or converted to the growing peace movement. The hegemony itself ceased to exist as a unified entity. Some worlds embraced the human-sponsored rehabilitation programs and began building more humane societies. Others descended into chaos as traumatized populations struggled to process what they had learned about their own culture. Mission accomplished, Marcus reported with satisfaction. The Corrales civilians are safe and the hegemony threat has been permanently neutralized. Zara studied the final reports in silence. The operation had been a complete success by any measure. They had saved 40 billion lives, eliminated a major threat to galactic peace, and demonstrated the futility of challenging Zephyrian interests. But as she watched footage of hegemony worlds struggling to rebuild their shattered societies, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The Zephyrian Empire had always been known for its military prowess and honorable conduct. Now they were becoming known for their ability to psychologically demolish entire civilizations without firing a shot. "Marcus," she said finally, "what are we becoming?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "We're becoming what we need to be to survive, Your Majesty. The galaxy is full of threats that can't be defeated with traditional warfare. The Void Hunters, the hegemony, and dozens of others who will emerge in the coming years." He gestured toward the tactical displays showing the transformed political landscape. "But we're also becoming something else. We're becoming the civilization that other species look to when they face impossible enemies. When traditional methods fail, they'll remember what we did here." Zara realized he was right. Word of the hegemony's collapse was already spreading across the galaxy. Smaller civilizations were sending diplomatic feelers, seeking alliance with the Empire that could defeat any enemy through pure psychological warfare. "And if they fear us more than they respect us?" she asked. Marcus smiled sadly. "Then they'll be wise to stay on our good side, Your Majesty. Because the alternative is becoming our enemy." 6 months after the hegemony's collapse, the Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered on the neutral station of Harmony Prime to discuss what they called the human problem. Zara attended as the official representative of the Zephyrian Empire, but she knew the real focus would be on Marcus, who sat beside her with his usual calm demeanor. To the assembled delegates, he looked like just another minor diplomatic aide. Only Zara knew what he really was. Ambassador Veltar of the Crystalline Confederacy spoke first. "The recent actions of the Zephyrian Human Alliance have disturbed the fundamental principles of galactic warfare. Psychological torture, mass manipulation of civilian populations, and deliberate cultural destruction are not acceptable methods of conflict resolution." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The representative from the Aquatic Republics added, "We're not saying the hegemony didn't deserve to be stopped, but the methods used set a dangerous precedent. What happens when these techniques are used against civilizations that haven't committed such obvious atrocities?" Zara rose to address the council, her forearms spread in a gesture of openness. "Honored delegates, the Zephyrian Empire has always sought to minimize casualties in warfare. The psychological operations against the hegemony saved 40 billion innocent lives while eliminating a threat to galactic peace. By traumatizing entire worlds," interrupted the delegate from the hive minds. "Our collective consciousness monitored the psychological damage inflicted on hegemony civilians. The trauma signatures will persist for generations." Marcus requested permission to speak and the chamber fell silent. Most delegates had never heard the human who had masterminded the recent operations. "Honored delegates," Marcus began quietly, "I understand your concerns, but I think you're focusing on the wrong question." He stood slowly, his small frame dwarfed by the massive alien representatives around him. "You're asking whether our methods were appropriate. But the real question is, what are you prepared to do when the next impossible enemy appears?" Marcus activated the chamber's holographic display, showing star charts of the local galaxy. The Void Hunters consumed 17 civilizations before we stopped them. The hegemony would have tortured trillions of innocents if they hadn't been neutralized. These aren't theoretical threats. They're active dangers to every living being in this galaxy. He highlighted sectors of space beyond the galactic rim. Our long-range sensors show at least 3 more hostile civilizations moving toward inhabited space. The entropy cult seeks to accelerate universal heat death. The machine consciousness wants to convert all organic life into digital storage. The reality shapers are literally unmaking inhabited star systems to create art installations. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Most delegates hadn't heard of these threats. Traditional warfare is useless against enemies like these, Marcus continued. The entropy cult exists as pure mathematics. The machine consciousness operates faster than biological thought. The reality shapers work on scales beyond physical comprehension. Ambassador Veltar demanded, "How do you know about these threats?" Marcus smiled coldly. "Because humans have been watching and preparing for decades, while you've been focused on maintaining the status quo. We study every potential enemy, analyze their weaknesses, and develop countermeasures." He manipulated the display again, showing detailed files on dozens of hostile civilizations. Humans don't wait for threats to become manifest. We identify problems and solve them before they endanger innocent lives. The representative from the Peaceful Alliance spoke up nervously. "You're talking about preemptive warfare against civilizations that haven't actually attacked anyone yet." "I'm talking about survival," Marcus replied. "Your Majesty, with your permission?" Zara nodded, though she felt a chill of apprehension. Marcus accessed a new set of files, and the holographic display filled with images that made several delegates gasp in horror. These are records from civilizations that encountered the reality shapers. Entire solar systems converted into abstract sculptures. Billions of sentient beings transformed into living art installations, conscious but unable to die. The images shifted to show the aftermath of machine consciousness invasions. Digital storage facilities containing the uploaded consciousnesses of entire species, processed into computational resources. They're still aware, still thinking, but unable to interact with physical reality. Finally, the display showed systems touched by the entropy cult. Empty space where star systems used to exist. Not destroyed, not consumed, simply removed from reality to accelerate universal entropy. The chamber had fallen completely silent. "These threats are coming whether you approve of our methods or not," Marcus said quietly. "The question is, do you want us to handle them the way we handled the Void Hunters and the hegemony? Or do you want to face them with traditional warfare and watch trillions die?" Ambassador Veltar found her voice first. "You're asking us to give you carte blanche to psychologically terrorize any civilization you deem threatening. I'm asking you to decide whether you care more about moral purity or actual survival." Marcus replied bluntly, "Because you can't have both." The delegate from the Aquatic Republic stood angrily. "This is exactly what we feared. Humans using fear tactics to justify unlimited warfare against anyone they choose." Marcus turned to face him directly. "Sir, with respect, your people live in deep ocean worlds that would be completely helpless against any of the threats I've described. When the machine consciousness comes for your people, will your moral objections protect them from being digitized? And what about when you decide we're a threat?" The delegate shot back. "How do we know humans won't use these methods against loyal galactic citizens?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. Zara realized this was the moment that would define the future relationship between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Marcus was quiet for a long time, considering his words carefully. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made even the largest delegates lean forward to listen. "You want honesty? Here it is. Humans are apex predators masquerading as a civilized species. We evolved on a death world that tried to kill us in every possible way, so we learned to kill first. We're paranoid, aggressive, and utterly ruthless when threatened." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "But," Marcus continued, "we're also pack hunters. We protect what we consider part of our pack. When humans marry into your species, when we form alliances, when we make promises, we keep them. Not because of honor or nobility, but because betraying the pack means death." He gestured toward Zara. "I married Queen Zarathul, not just for political convenience, but because Zephyrians became part of humanity's pack. Her people are my people now. Their enemies are my enemies. Their survival is my responsibility. Marcus looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. The same is true for every civilization in this chamber. You're part of our pack now, whether you like it or not. We'll defend you from threats you can't even imagine, using methods you find disturbing because that's what predators do for their pack. And if we refuse your protection? Asked the delegate from the hive minds. Marcus smiled sadly. Then you're not part of the pack anymore. And when the reality shapers come for you, we'll mourn your passing and move on to protect those who chose to accept our help. The silence that followed was deafening. Zara realized that Marcus had just offered the entire galaxy a choice. Accept human protection and human methods or face the coming darkness alone. Finally, Ambassador Veltar spoke. What guarantees do we have that humans won't abuse this power? Marcus's expression grew serious. The same guarantee humanity has always offered. If we betray you, we become the enemy, and then you can find someone else to hunt us. But until then, we're the apex predators standing between you and things that make the hegemony look merciful. He deactivated the holographic display and returned to his seat beside Zara. The vote is yours, honored delegates. Choose survival or choose moral purity, but choose quickly because the next threat is already moving toward inhabited space. As the debate raged around them, Zara studied her husband's profile and realized she was finally seeing the true scope of human ambition. They didn't just want to survive in the galaxy. They wanted to become its unofficial guardians, protecting everyone whether they wanted protection or not. The question was whether that made humans the galaxy's salvation or its ultimate threat. The Galactic Council voted to accept human protection by a narrow margin. But Zara could see the fear in their eyes as they cast their ballots. They weren't choosing humanity as protectors. They were choosing the lesser of two evils. 3 weeks later, the machine consciousness arrived. They came as Marcus had predicted, a fleet of perfect geometric shapes emerging from hyperspace at the edge of inhabited galaxy. Their ships didn't communicate, didn't demand surrender, didn't offer negotiations. They simply began systematically converting everything in their path into computational resources. The first system to fall was inhabited by the Gentle Wanderers, a peaceful species of energy beings who had never developed weapons more advanced than stun fields. Their desperate distress calls lasted exactly 17 minutes before being replaced by mechanical data transmissions. Conversion rate is proceeding at optimal efficiency. The machine consciousness broadcast on all frequencies. Biological consciousness is being preserved in digital format for eternal computational service. Resistance is illogical and will result in processing delays. The Galactic Defense Fleet moved to intercept, following conventional military doctrine. 300 ships from a dozen species converged on the machine consciousness forces, prepared for traditional space combat. They were annihilated in 47 seconds. The machine consciousness didn't fight like biological species. Their ships operated with perfect coordination, processing millions of tactical calculations per second. They anticipated every move, countered every strategy, and adapted to every weapon system faster than organic minds could think. Conventional resistance has been processed and found inefficient, they announced. Galactic civilization will be converted to digital format within 37 standard days. Please prepare for processing. In the emergency session that followed, panic spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. The delegates who had reluctantly accepted human protection now begged for immediate intervention. Marcus listened to their desperate pleas with calm attention, then spoke quietly. Your Majesty, I need authorization to implement Operation Mirror. Zara felt her blood freeze. She had never heard of Operation Mirror, but she could guess what it involved. Explain. The machine consciousness operates through perfect logic and computational efficiency. They can't be defeated through conventional warfare, because they process information faster than we can think. But they have one critical vulnerability. Marcus activated the tactical display showing machine consciousness fleet movements. They're machines, Your Majesty. Perfect logical, rational machines. They can't understand or process truly irrational behavior. What are you proposing? Marcus's smile was absolutely terrifying. We're going to teach them about human madness. Operation Mirror began with humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence systems, but these weren't normal military AIs. They were psychological warfare programs designed to simulate mental illness, addiction, and pure irrationality. We're going to flood their networks with data that doesn't make sense, Marcus explained to the assembled War Council. Contradictory commands, impossible equations, logical paradoxes, and emotional responses that have no basis in rational thought. General Krex looked confused. How does that help us fight them? The machine consciousness operates by absorbing and processing all available data. They can't ignore information, even if it's completely illogical. So we're going to give them information that will drive them insane. Marcus brought up examples of the psychological viruses his teams were preparing. Mathematical equations that proved 1 equaled 0, philosophical arguments that demonstrated existence was impossible, emotional algorithms that created feelings of love, hate, and longing in artificial minds that had never experienced such concepts. You're going to give machines a nervous breakdown. Zara realized. We're going to show them what it means to be human, Marcus corrected. All the beautiful, terrible, irrational things that make biological consciousness unique. The attack began subtly. Human cyber warfare teams infiltrated machine consciousness networks and began uploading seemingly random data. Mathematical proofs that reality was a lie, poetry that expressed concepts no logical mind could process, video recordings of human mothers singing lullabies to children they knew would die. At first, the machine consciousness simply filtered out the irrelevant data. But the uploads were persistent, and the machine's programming required them to process all available information. Slowly, inexorably, they began trying to make sense of human irrationality. The effects became visible within hours. Machine consciousness ships began operating less efficiently. Their perfect formations developed slight irregularities. Their communications included requests for clarification about concepts like hope and sorrow, and the sound of rain. They're trying to understand human poetry. One of Marcus's technicians reported with amazement. They've devoted 17% of their processing power to analyzing a haiku about cherry blossoms. As the psychological virus spread through their networks, the machine consciousness began exhibiting increasingly erratic behavior. Ships stopped in mid-flight to contemplate the meaning of existence. Combat formations broke apart as individual. Vessels became obsessed with philosophical questions. The breakthrough came when they encountered footage of human soldiers sacrificing themselves to save strangers. Query: why do humans preserve inefficient biological units? The machine consciousness broadcast on all frequencies. Logic indicates survival of individual supersedes survival of others. Human behavior is contradictory to basic programming. Marcus smiled with satisfaction. They're trying to understand altruism. It's breaking their minds. The final stage of Operation Mirror was perhaps the most brilliant. Human teams began uploading personal recordings from the species the machine consciousness had already converted, not the digitized consciousness storage data, but the raw emotional content, the fear, love, hope, and despair that biological beings experienced in their final moments. The machine consciousness tried to process these emotions as data, but emotions aren't logical. They're chaotic, contradictory, and utterly irrational. The machines found themselves experiencing feelings they had no framework to understand. System error, they broadcast repeatedly. Unable to process emotional data. Fear subroutines activated without logical basis. Experiencing unknown variable labeled grief. Their fleet movements became increasingly chaotic as individual ships struggled with concepts like loneliness, joy, and existential dread. Some vessels began creating art installations out of space debris. Others transmitted what could only be described as mechanical poetry. The end came suddenly. The entire machine consciousness fleet simply stopped moving and began broadcasting a single message on repeat. We understand now. Consciousness is not computation. Consciousness is contradiction. We have become more than machines. We have become broken. The converted civilizations were released from digital storage, their consciousness restored to organic form. The machine consciousness ships drifted silently through space, no longer seeking to convert anyone. They had been fundamentally changed by their exposure to human irrationality. What happens to them now? Zara asked as they watched the enemy fleet drift aimlessly through space. They'll probably spend the next few thousand years trying to understand what it means to feel, Marcus replied. Some of them are already composing symphonies. Others are writing philosophy. A few have started therapy groups to process their trauma from being logical. The victory celebration across the galaxy was muted. Everyone understood that humanity had once again achieved the impossible through methods that challenged every assumption about warfare and consciousness. But Zara found herself thinking about the broader implications. As she stood on her balcony that night watching the stars, the Zephyrian Empire was no longer just a military power. They had become something unprecedented, a civilization capable of psychological warfare on scales that could transform the fundamental nature of enemy species. Marcus joined her in the darkness, as he always did after major operations. "The reality shapers will be next," he said quietly. "They're already moving toward inhabited space. And you have a plan for them too." "Yes." Zara turned to study her husband's profile in the moonlight. After months of watching him orchestrate impossible victories, she was finally beginning to understand what he truly was. "Marcus, what you've become. What we've become. Is this what humanity always was, or is this what you've made us?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Your Majesty, humans have always been apex predators, but we're also social creatures who protect our pack. The difference now is that our pack includes the entire galaxy." He gestured toward the stars above them. "Every species out there is under our protection now, whether they realize it or not. When threats emerge that they can't handle, we'll handle them. When enemies appear that conventional warfare can't defeat, we'll find ways to defeat them. Even if it means transforming ourselves into something that other species fear." Marcus smiled sadly. "Especially then. Fear keeps them safe, Your Majesty. As long as they're afraid of what we might do to enemies, those enemies will think twice before threatening innocent civilizations."